Longlegs is the newest film by filmmaker Oz Perkins, who is the son of horror legend Anthony Perkins of Psycho fame. He's back on the big screen. This is his return to horror form, and it follows FBI agent Lee Harker, who is assigned to an unsolved serial killer case that takes an unexpected turn, revealing evidence of the occult. Harker discovers a personal connection to the killer and must stop him before he strikes again. I've never really seen an Oz Perkins film. I know who he is basically through his role in Legally Blonde. That's so embarrassing for me to admit, but that's kind of how I know him. I've never seen Hansel and Gretel. I've never seen Blackcoat's Daughter or any of his films. So I went in blind to his filmography with this one. Neon has been ramping up this movie's marketing, claiming it's the scariest film ever made. The stills and the reveals and the trailers they've dropped in the past few weeks have been really intense. People in reactions have said it's like really scary, really enthralling, like one of the scariest films ever made. Having seen it, it's definitely scary, but it's not in the traditional sense of the word scary. You see, this film relies little on jump scares. There's only like 3 or 4 throughout the entire runtime, in fact. What makes this film so effective and so scary is its tension and dread. Throughout the film, the stakes are consistent as we watch Lee Harker try to solve this case, and as the clues grow more and more sinister and more personal to her everyday life, it becomes really, really engaging and enthralling to witness. The puzzle pieces work together to create this really, really bleak portrait of a crime scene like this. Maika Monroe plays Lee Harker, and she does fantastic work. I've always been a big fan of hers from watching It Follows. I think she's a very talented horror actress, but here it's not just like the familiar horror tropes that she's going through. She actually has a chance to kind of expand on her performance and her character, kind of deliver a performance we've never really seen from her, and she shines with ease. Like, her character is so good, her performance is so good. But Nicolas Cage plays Longlegs, and it is like the performance of the movie by far. He disappears under prosthetic makeup, and his character is so scary and his performance is so menacing that I will never be able to look at him the same way again. Like, I'm a huge fan of him and I love his like comedic work and his action movie work, but here it's so different from anything he's ever played before that you watch him on screen and you can't even tell it's Nicolas Cage. He does such an insane job of blending into the character and being more menacing here. The movie really sets it up from the opening. There's an excellent opening scene that really sets the tone off the bat and is the best scene in this movie. It's shot in a 4:3 square aspect ratio, and it's a flashback, so that means that it's not really expanded to the full aspect ratio, and it makes it more personal and kind of like confined and claustrophobic. And the way they introduce the character of Longlegs in this film is so visceral that the jump scare is just absolutely insane. You only see the top half of his face at first, but as the frame opens wider and wider and you're able to see his character, it gets so intense that scene has lived rent-free in my head since I've seen it. In fact, there's so many shots in this that are so eerie and so creepy that I have not been able to shake them. I wouldn't say the film as a whole is definitely scary. There are parts that are definitely scary. There's like 3 or 4 jump scares as mentioned. It's just that tension. It kind of reminded me of Silence of the Lambs, not only because of the serial killer kind of like subject matter, but just in how that tension is drawn out. As the cat and mouse game gets really, really detailed and complex, and as the stakes grow more and more high for each character involved, it really becomes enthralling to watch this kind of case play out, and also as she gets closer and closer to unveiling the truth behind the crimes. Oz Perkins is such a masterful director. I will have to check out more of his work like immediately. I am so impressed with the filmmaking on display here. The cinematography and editing alone, playing with those aspect ratios, giving this intense, grimy feel to it, really makes the tension and dread so much worse. As mentioned, the cinematography, there's some shots in here that are horrifying. There were some shots in here where nothing overtly scary was happening, but Oz Perkins lets details in the background get more and more prevalent so that you literally, like, there were some images in here that I had to cover my eyes. Even if it wasn't anything like actually scary, you could just tell something was off about the frame, and it's so good and so well done. And I've never seen a horror movie that effectively makes something seem so scary with so little in general. Overall, it's a really solid horror movie and is definitely scary. Do I think it's the scariest film ever made? Absolutely not. I think Neon's kind of going overboard with their marketing on this film, because sure, it's definitely a scary movie. I will not question that. I am still thinking about it, and I saw it like last night. It's like 10 plus hours like ago at this point. I cannot stop thinking about it. It's one of those films like Silence of the Lambs where it's just so visceral and like you remember it because of how it makes you feel that tension and anxiety. But I will say, nowhere near as memorable as Silence of the Lambs or as masterful as Silence of the Lambs. For one, the script is really weak, and that really pains me because I feel like Oz Perkins could have made this film so much better if he had worked with a better screenwriter. The character of Lee Harker in particular, the main character, is just flat. I mean, we're supposed to care about her and the motives behind this crime and care for her as the stakes grow higher, but for me personally, her character came across as flat and uninspired and really two-dimensional. Couldn't really empathize with her or understand her motives properly, and I think Maika Monroe did the best that she could with the material, but I really feel like a different screenwriter would have maybe fleshed it out more, made her more empathizable, made her more relatable. And it's definitely a slower pace. I know Oz Perkins is a filmmaker that really just lets his run times expand so that the details set in first and then the thrills follow, and that definitely happens here. Aside from the opening sequence, the first probably 40 minutes of this are very slow as the evidence is unveiled and details pile up in the case. I would say the final act is definitely where things pick up, but the final act of this film is where I have the most issues with it personally, and starting with the fact that the ending just simply is not good. That's the thing that really pains me about this film, is that of course there's supernatural elements. That comes with the territory. It's about a serial killer who's obsessed with the occult. Of course you're going to get in that territory. But my problem with the film is it hints at these supernatural things throughout, sure, but throughout the film, you're like, oh yeah, the case is going to have a definitive ending where you find out the motives behind it, the evidence behind it. It really was set up such an intriguing crime thriller mystery that you really wanted to know, how did this happen? Where's all the evidence? But the film never does that, because the film instead is insistent on relying on generic supernatural horror schlock to fill its ending and really summarize everything. But that also leaves the audience with more questions than it does answers. You never really get a definitive ending to this case. It's very unsatisfying on that level. And the last 30 minutes in general feel like something from a Blumhouse movie, one of those generic teenage horror movies that we've seen before. It actually reminded me of the ending of Smile a little bit, that film that released 2 years ago at this point. It was definitely generic, and it was just so disappointing to see a film that does something so different for most of its runtime and is so engaging fall in the classic tropes of supernatural horror in the last 30 minutes. Just really, I wish they had made it more grounded. It would have made it more horrifying and realistic. I walked away thinking this is a terrifying movie for sure, but that ending felt way too over the top and felt like they didn't really know how to end it in a practical, grounded way, so they just threw in supernatural stuff out of the blue. I'm not saying it detracts from the experience overall. It's still a good movie, but that ending really just did not do enough to set up something worthy of a conclusion after the first stellar second and third and first and second act. Overall, lackluster ending and script aside, this is a very memorable film, and it definitely left an impression. As I said, am I thinking that it's the scariest film ever made based on Neon's marketing? No. Do I think that people are overhyping this unbelievably so? Yes. Do I think that it's a film that is different than any horror movie made nowadays, and it definitely is worth checking out on that level? Yes, because this is so different from most horror movies. If you like horror movies, go watch this in theaters. Go support this, because if you want more independent, original horror movies to be made nowadays, definitely this is a clear indicator of that. Oz Perkins is a master of horror filmmaking, and it's clearly on display. I just wish, the ending, the script could have been tightened up more, maybe tightened up some of the pacing, and you would have had yourself a way better film. That's why I'm giving Longlegs a 79 out of 100. Thank you guys so much for watching this review. If you're new to my channel, please do not forget to click that subscribe button down below, like the video, and turn on push notifications to be notified whenever new videos drop on my channel. With that being said, this is Mitchell signing off until next time. Peace out.